IB Biology, Ecology, and Conservation, Option C, Part 8, introduces population biology, the study of a group of organisms of the same species living in the same area at the same time. This movie has its focus on the growth of populations in the environment, with particular emphasis on the J and S-shaped growth curves, which are typical of populations. This movie will examine the nature of exponential growth and the density-dependent factors that result in the S-shaped logistic curve. This is a higher-level topic only. The essential idea is dynamic biological processes impact population density and population growth. Here is the outline of the IB Bio, Ecology, and Conservation Option C movies. Use this outline to find the part that you need. This movie has its focus right here. As humans, we tend to favor thinking about humans, especially when we are studying populations. I want to encourage you to be applying all of the population concepts to populations other than humans. When we talk about populations, we'll be talking about populations of zebra and only zebra, or wildebeest and only wildebeest. Part 8 has its focus on population ecology. Populations, defined here as a group of interbreeding individuals of one species that occupy a given area at a given time. When we look at density-dependent factors that limit the growth of populations, we'll be speaking about the density of the population, number per area. Keep this in mind. Also, density-dependent factors involve the community at large. Be thoughtful. Keep your eye on the ball. Here is the J-shaped growth curve. This curve displays exponential growth. As you can see, the number added to the population increases with each unit of time. The amount being added to the system is proportional to the amount already present. The bigger the system is, the greater the increase in the system. At the risk of being too simplistic, more adults bearing more offspring results in more adults, thus even more adults bearing more offspring, etc., etc. Exponential growth results from positive feedback in an ideal environment where resources are unlimited. Positive feedback is when a change in the direction of a system causes further change in the same direction. The J-shaped curve is an indication of positive feedback processes. Be sure to distinguish exponential growth from linear growth. With exponential growth, the number added to the population increases with each unit of time, while with linear growth, the number added is the same per unit of time. Exponential population growth occurs in an environment where resources are unlimited. Maybe this slide will make exponential growth more clear. I've asked, compare the difference in population growth rate, which is the change in the size over the time period, in year 3 to 4 versus year 5 to 6. You can see that the number added to the population, year 3 to 4, which is actually this number here, is less than the number added to the population, this number here, in year 5 to 6. Both changes occur over 1 year, and the number added in 1 year, 5 to 6, is much greater than the number added year 3 to 4. This is typical of exponential growth. The change in the population size is a function of births, natality plus immigration, minus deaths, mortality plus emigration per the time period. Get to know this relationship of how a population changes over time. While exponential growth occurs when resources are unlimited, resources are not always unlimited. Thus, the population growth slows. Here is the IB syllabus statement. Population growth slows as the population reaches the carrying capacity of the environment, and limiting factors regulate population size. This is an S-shaped growth curve, the logistic curve. Early in the time period, the growth is exponential. But when the environment changes due to the size of the population, the rate of growth begins to slow. Eventually, the population reaches a size where there is little change in the size of the population. Once populations reach carrying capacity, they tend to oscillate around carrying capacity, defined here as the maximum number of individuals that the environment can support sustainably over time. Growth per unit time is a function of birth rate, natality, plus immigration, minus death rate, mortality, plus emigration. In time period 1, the population grows slightly, thus the absolute number of births plus immigration must be greater than the absolute number of deaths plus emigration. In time period 2, the same is true except that the difference between births and deaths is greater than in time period 1, and the population grows exponentially. In time periods 3 and 4, we can see that the difference between births and deaths is quite small, approaching 0, where the population no longer grows. Here are the relevant IB syllabus statements. The phases in the sigmoid S growth curve can be explained by the relative rates of natality, birth, mortality, death, immigration, and emigration. Discuss the effect of natality, mortality, immigration, and emigration on population size. These should be fairly straightforward for you. In this slide, we can see the J-shaped curve and the S-shaped logistic curve that oscillates around carrying capacity. The growth in any population is purely a function of births and immigration, balanced against deaths and emigration. The change in the size of the population over time, delta N over time, is due to the relative rates of births, deaths, and immigration and emigration in the time period. In this slide, we can see the hand indicating that early on in time, the growth rate is rapid, in fact exponential. The rate of natality is greater than the rate of mortality. But as the population reaches a certain size, the growth rate begins to slow. The rate of natality declines, or the rate of mortality increases, or both. When the population reaches the maximum size that the environment can support, rates of natality and mortality are approximately equal. Population growth is negligible. The population size is likely to oscillate around carrying capacity. In this slide, you can see the J-shaped and S-shaped curves. Hopefully you understand the nature of exponential growth, where the rate of growth increases every year due to the availability of unlimited resources. However, in the logistic model, as the population increases in size, population growth rate slows due to environmental constraints. The population reaches carrying capacity, which is the maximum number of individuals the environment can support sustainably. In this example, 1,000 individuals. The factors that limit a population's growth may be top-down, such as predators, or bottom-up, such as available food. More on this in the slides to come. Through this time period, biotic potential is very high because resources are effectively unlimited due to the small numbers of individuals in the population. But at a certain point in time, a certain population size, various limiting factors cause the rate of growth to decline as the population approaches carrying capacity. At carrying capacity, the rate of growth approximates 0. Early in the growth of a population, the J and S-shaped curves are 1. But in nature, once a population reaches a certain size, a certain density, the growth rate begins to decline because of the environmental resistance, as it's called here, and the curve becomes S-shaped. The resistance to growth comes from limiting factors, and limiting factors can be top-down, such as predators controlling the growth of a prey population, Or limiting factors can be bottom-up, such as the availability of grasses controlling the size of a herbivore population. The population, initially small, begins to grow, then reaches a critical number, a certain density, above which the population can no longer increase at its biotic maximum. As the density of the population increases, environmental resistance reduces the rate of growth. And the environmental resistance could be lack of food or nutrients, lack of water, lack of suitable habitat, predators, disease, parasites, or competitors. Here are the density-dependent limiting factors that operate as negative feedback mechanisms. We have food supply, bottom up, nutrient availability, bottom up, light availability, bottom up, predator number, top down, disease would be top down, competitors, top down, waste buildup would probably be bottom up, and nest sites would also be bottom up. There are density-independent factors that limit the growth of a population as well. These factors will limit population growth regardless of the size of the population. A hurricane will sweep across a small Caribbean island and reduce population size regardless of how large or small the population might be. It's important to note that populations can, for brief periods of time, exceed carrying capacity. When this happens, it can only last for a short period of time before the population would return, some might say crash, to a more sustainable number. While I've mentioned this particular aspect of limiting factors, I've come back to it to strengthen it. Limiting factors can be top-down or bottom-up. Nutrient-poor soil or low water availability would be bottom-up control of the growth of a plant population in the desert. Herbivory would be a top-down control of the growth of a plant population. This lake water is nutrient poor, as can be seen in its perfect clarity. Nutrient shortage, a bottom-up control, limits the growth of algae. This is a diagram of another oligotrophic lake, nutrient poor lake. Nutrient shortage, a bottom-up control, limits the growth of algae. Algal blooms, such as this one off the coast of Florida, are regulated by nutrient availability, a bottom-up control. The feeding of the urchins on seagrass or the feeding on algae by crustaceans, both top-down controls, limits the growth of plant populations or algal blooms. The predator, the leopard, is a top-down control of the size of a prey population. The availability of a prey population is a bottom-up control for the predator population. As the prey population increases, the size of the predator population follows. The time lag is indicative of the availability of prey as a bottom-up control of the predator population size. Here is our next IB syllabus statement. Growing global population is of international concern regardless of different growth rates in different countries. Countries around the world have different rates of growth. Some countries have positive growth and some negative. Nevertheless, the world's population is growing. In other words, the rate of positive growth in the world is greater than the rate of negative growth in the world. The human population has been growing exponentially for more than the last 100 years and continues to do so. How long will the human population continue to grow, and what is the carrying capacity of the Earth for the human population? Have we yet to reach carrying capacity, or have we already passed it? The growing global population is of international concern because for every new mouth to feed, food is required, and for every person there is waste production. The world has nearly 7.5 billion people and will certainly reach 9 billion. Can we continue to grow more food? The growing global population is of international concern. When we wonder about the Earth's carrying capacity for people, we often forget that people's existence varies widely. In other words, people do not have equal access to the world's resources. As the world's population grows larger, at what standard will people live? Even without further growth in the size of the human population, we've already degraded the environment. The growing global population is of international concern with respect to the degradation of the environment. Consider climate change. The growing global population is of international concern. Are we degrading the environment in ways that will limit, if not harm, the human population? If policies in different governments could limit fertility, limit the average number of children per female in the woman's lifetime to below 2, then the human population might rise to 8 billion and then decline after 2050. But if the average number of children per female per lifetime is 2 or even a bit higher, the population will easily reach 9 billion by 2050. If public policy cannot keep the average number of children per female per lifetime below 3 or more, the world's population will reach 10 billion or more by 2050. It doesn't matter that some countries in the world have a negative growth rate. The average growth rate of the world is positive and will be for some time to come. And part of the problem is that we don't know what the Earth's carrying capacity for people might be. It's just possible that we have already exceeded the carrying capacity, especially considering the environmental damage done by pollution. Here is our next IB syllabus statement, a statement that will be followed up in lab. Model growth curves using a simple organism such as yeast or a species of lemna. Here are the population growth curves for 2 lemna species, otherwise known as duckweed. When the populations are grown separately, the 2 curves resemble the theoretical S-shaped growth curve. Remember that due to competitive exclusion, when the 2 species are grown together, one species, Gibba, outcompetes Polyrhiza. Here are the growth curves of 2 species of Paramecium, grown separately and then grown together in a mixed culture. When the populations are grown separately, the 2 curves approximate the theoretical S-shaped growth curve. But due to competitive exclusion, when the 2 species are grown together, one species outcompetes the other. And that brings us to the end of Ecology, Conservation, Option C, Part 8.